What this tells me is that we are having, if you like, a long duration bond crisis, which isn't just a little bit of unpleasantness, if you like, at the long end of the US Treasury market. This is a global problem. And the point is that, what do these yields tell us? Well, these yields tell us that the market is pricing in risk for duration, big time. And that risk is increasing. So how do you hedge out of this? Well, the answer is you just get out of credit and you get into gold. Long bond yields. I mean, it's simple as that. In all the four major currencies, dollar, euro, Japanese yen, sterling, the 30-year bonds are all moving into new high ground. The US long bond isn't quite yet, but it's only a matter of time before it does. And the reason for that is that there is greater risk, if you like, in fiat currencies. We're coming to the end of the fiat currency era. We have this situation where central banks, I think, are aware that economies are stagnating, if you like. That's probably putting it at its most polite. And so they do want to ease on interest rates as and when they can, but they're prevented from doing so because inflation is still persistent, more so in some jurisdictions than in others. And the other thing is that government borrowing is still rocketing, and it's rocketing everywhere. I mean, we know what the situation is in America has been discussed ad nauseum and so on and so on. But I think the poster child, if you like, for these problems are probably the UK. I'll give you a little bit of a background on that. It was last year, the Labour government had their first budget. This was with the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves. And she took the opportunity effectively to pay back the Labour Party supporters, the Labour Party having been out of office for, I don't know, well over a decade. So she, raised wages for bureaucrats, public employees in the health service, etc., etc. They're changing the trade union legislation so that people can go on strike more easily, so that, the moment you take someone on, they got full protection, so there's no sort of, we'll give you a 3-month trial sort of thing. That's gone. So all these sort of pet things have come up. And there are other pet things as well, like we hate the bourgeoisie. I mean, I'm talking schoolroom socialism, really. And that's the standard of it. We hate the bourgeoisie, so we're going to hit the bourgeoisie. They differentiate in the economy by calling people either working people or the rich. Yeah, the bourgeoisie are the rich. We're not working people, apparently. The working people are basically trade union members and the unemployed, which I know sounds a bit of a contradiction, but that's really where they are. So, they've gone down that route. And the other thing is they've penalized the rich, if you like, by taxes. And what she's done is she's done away with the non-domicile status, which basically, non-domicile basically meant that if you were a foreigner, you could come and live in the UK, you would pay tax on your UK earnings, and you would pay a figure like £40,000 to cover all your overseas earnings. So you could be a billionaire living in London quite happily, and your total tax would be something like £100,000, whatever. So that was the non-dom status. They've done away with that, so that from next year, non-doms don't get that. They're taxed on their worldwide earnings. So what happens? They all disappear off to Dubai, some have gone back to America, believe it or not, and Italy. Italy is the new place to go to, Milan. So, and I understand that the boss of the European head of Goldman Sachs has relocated from London to Milan. So, and I mean, when you look at our tax structure, the top 1% of wage earners, income earners in the UK pay 30% of all the tax. 30%. They're gone. Everything she has done, I'm not going to go through the whole list, but everything she has done has actually reduced her tax take. So the result is there is an even greater budget deficit as a result of that budget. She now has the problem that obviously the Treasury has had from the Inland Revenue, which is the sub-department of the Treasury, returns as to how tax income is going and all the rest of it. And the Treasury will see that tax revenue has actually collapsed. It's gone down. It's a real problem. So quite clearly, what you need to do is to reverse those measures and just make the place a hell of a lot more friendly so that people will stay here and earn and pay their taxes. But no, they won't do that because obviously you've got a budget deficit and you need actually to cut spending. They tried to do that. They tried to cut welfare payments. And the Parliamentary Labour Party, in other words, the members of Parliament in the Labour Party, wouldn't support it. Because as far as they're concerned, I mean, remember, we're talking schoolroom socialism here. They're there to represent people, the poor, the people who are on welfare benefits. We want to see their benefits increased, not reduced. So they had to drop that one. And this is why Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, was seen in tears in Parliament while this was being debated. And actually, it wasn't while it was during Prime Minister questions time when questions arose on this particular topic. So she's actually just stuck. She's completely stuck because she cannot get the support, which the Treasury says she needs to cut spending. She can't get the support from it, political support. So where do we go? Well, the answer basically is we're in a debt trap. It's just getting worse and worse and worse and worse. We had the same situation in this country back in 1975 when we had, again, a far-left socialist government who refused to cut spending and talked about increasing taxes even further. They were even talking about wealth taxes and all the rest of it. I mean, I remember that. The Chancellor of the day, Dennis Healey, was threatening people, the rich. He was going to squeeze them until the pips squeak. That was his phrase, and it's that people remember that. That was the whole thing, and we got exactly the same situation today. Now, what happened in those days was we had a sterling collapse, which America kindly rescued us. They came in and bought sterling, supported it so that the bears were squeezed and all the rest of it, panic over in the sterling market for the moment. But in order to close their long position, they sent the IMF in, basically, to force the government into doing the cuts, the spending cuts, and the tax rises that were necessary to close the budget deficit. And that was in 1976. Now, the point behind all this is that this was against a background of rising long bond yields, which had to be accompanied by rising front end, like bank rate, like base rate, the very short end of the yield curve, that had to be dragged up as well. And I remember well, and I've said this so many times, I remember 3 gilt issues, UK Treasury bond issues, coupons of 15%, 15 and a quarter, and the 15 and a halves of 98, which was medium dated. It's like the equivalent, if you like, of, it was actually a 12-year bond at that time. So it's rather like the 10 years now. Now, where is that going to leave us? We've got a situation now where bond yields, and one thing we looked at actually was the yield on the 30-year gilt. That is going higher. There is no doubt about it. It is going a lot higher. Yep, and that's going up. That will go over 10%, and it will do even more than that. Why? Because there's no IMF going to come in this time to rescue us. That's not going to happen. And so the other side of that is that hedge funds apparently, this is according to the Bank of England, hold roughly 30% of gilts, because what they've been doing is they've been playing the yield curve. They've been borrowing short through the repo facility to buy gilts, long gilts. So they've been picking up, if you like, the difference along the yield curve. Now, that is, according to the Bank of England, $77 billion worth, billion pounds worth of gilts, which is roughly $100 billion worth. Now, remember, we're a smaller economy than America. We're used to talking trillions in America. Here, we're talking about a pretty substantial thing. Now, so what happens when these guys go? I mean, these guys are going to have to sell these positions as soon as it becomes apparent to them that ahead of the autumn statement, the UK's finances are deteriorating extremely rapidly. And I see that an analyst at UniCredit today has come out with a statement that he expects sterling to fall 10% against the euro by the year end. I mean, I think there are very few people who actually realize this yet. But this, Danny, I tell you, is a very uncomfortable position. And furthermore, this breakout on the gilt yield, the long gilt yield, is going to occur before the autumn statement, when the Chancellor has got to come out with the figures and how she's going to close that deficit gap. The autumn statement, we don't have a date yet, which is quite unusual. We usually know by now. I guess there are people in the Treasury or whatever, thinking, oh my God, when we don't want to do this, So, but it's likely to be at the very end of September or in the early weeks of October. Looking at those charts, and we didn't look just at that one, but all the long bond charts in the major currencies are sending the same signal. And what is worrying is that the German one is really broken out now.
Yeah, there it is.
If you got Germany there, you see that's going high. Now, the point about Germany is that, if you like, is the marker bond for the whole of the Eurozone. Where that goes, it takes the others. There are huge differentials all over the place, with the different nations. But that's the one that will take the other ones. And that, if you look at the German economy is tanking. I mean, it really is. So, you've got the economy tanking, you've got that shooting up. This is not good. And then if you look at the 30-year JGB, now I know we don't normally look at the 30-year because the Bank of Japan owns 56% or something, or 60% of the 10-year. But that JGB is not good news. That is telling us exactly the same thing.
Yep, yields are spiking.
These, and if you look at the long bond too, we've got the same story.
Yeah.
So, what this tells me is that we are having, if you like, a long duration bond crisis, which isn't just a little bit of unpleasantness, if you like, at the long end of the US Treasury market. This is a global problem. And the point is that, what do these yields tell us? Well, these yields tell us that the market is pricing in risk for duration, big time. And that risk is increasing. So how do you hedge out of this? Well, the answer is you just get out of credit and you get into gold.